Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Luke chapter 6. In the last chapter, we saw Jesus begin to kind of butt heads with the Pharisees, and in this chapter, we'll see that continue. But Jesus is also going to show what his messianic kingdom will look like. He does this through how he selects his 12 apostles, and through teaching his kingdom manifesto of loving your enemies and treating other people how you would want to be treated. At the end of the day, Jesus' kingdom is coming, and actually, in a way, it's already here. But the question is, will we build our lives on our neurotic, self-serving anxieties, or will we trust in Jesus and build our lives on following him? Now it happened that he was passing through some grain fields on a Sabbath, and his disciples were picking the heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands, and eating the grain. But some of the Pharisees said, "Why do you do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus, answering them, said, "Have you not even read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for any to eat, except the priests alone, and he gave it to his companions. And he was saying to them, 'The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.'" Jesus' beef with the Pharisees continues into this chapter. They rebuke him and his disciples for snacking on some ripe grain on a day that happens to be the Sabbath. Their claim is that they're harvesting grain, and harvesting grain is work, and it's illegal to do work on the day of rest. Actually, according to the Old Testament, this should result in death. However, Jesus reminds the Pharisees of a story involving David from 1 Samuel 21. While David was on the run from King Saul, God provided for David and his companions through the priest at the time, giving them leftover consecrated bread. Now, according to Leviticus 24, only the priest and his family can actually eat from that consecrated bread. But God's explicit provision for his anointed king overruled those generalized terms. And so Jesus, in the same way, is claiming to be God's anointed king and claiming that God is providing for him and his disciples through this grain that they've picked up. And Jesus says he has the authority to claim this because he is Lord over the Sabbath, a statement that is sure to fire up the Pharisees. Jesus is trying to point out that the Sabbath was never about restricting yourself to rest, right? That's not actually rest at all. It was a weekly reminder for oneself to trust in God and thank him and worship him for the provision he had provided. It was a sign of being in a relationship with him, being in a covenant with him. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he healed on the Sabbath, so that they might find reason to accuse him. But he knew what they were thinking, and he said to the man with the withered hand, "Get up and come forward." And he got up and came forward. And Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to destroy it?" After looking around at them all, he said to him, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was restored. But they themselves were filled with rage and discussed together what they might do to Jesus. Jesus continues to kind of poke at this Pharisaic bear by intentionally healing a crippled man in the synagogue on the Sabbath. Jesus is arguing that it is not work to save someone's life, and it's not work to bring them into new creation. After all, the Sabbath was all about reminding people that a new creation was coming. Remember how the current creation was made in 6 days, and then God rested on the seventh. And the Jews kept up with that cycle in anticipation of God fulfilling his promise on restoring everything. And so Jesus isn't breaking the Sabbath by healing this man. He's actually doing what the Sabbath always pointed to. He's doing in micro what God plans to do to the whole world. And what it also shows is that the legalism of the Pharisees has taken away their empathy. And incredibly, unfortunately, we are seeing this creep back up in American churches today. It was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also named as apostles: Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James and John, and Philip and Bartholomew, and Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Through Luke's gospel so far, we have often seen how Jesus prioritized solitary time with God. And before he appoints his 12 apostles, Luke says how Jesus spent the entire night before on a mountain in prayer alone with God. And he's doing this to make sure he's aligned with his will. And then he calls 12 specific men out of all of his disciples to become his ministry partners. If we were doing this today by our own standards, we might pick the 12 people who are best at drawing a crowd, who are really charismatic. Maybe we select the 12 richest in our congregation because they have the finances to back us. But Jesus does not go by those standards at all. There's a lot of diversity in their backgrounds, but all of these men are somehow or another outcasts. You've got working class fishermen like Peter and James and John. You've got a tax collector like Matthew, who was hated in society. There's Simon, who's somehow involved with the Zealots, a militaristic resistance force that was raised to fight against the Romans. And of course, also we hear about Judas, who will eventually betray Jesus. And Jesus specifically chooses 12 men to represent a new 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus is bringing a new messianic kingdom, the kingdom Israel was always supposed to be. And so having 12 new apostles is a symbol of that concept. Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place. And there was a large crowd of his disciples, and a great throng of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were being cured. And all the people were trying to touch him, for power was coming from him and healing them all. The word about Jesus is spreading. People are coming from as far as Gentile Tyre and Sidon just to hear Jesus speak and to be healed from their diseases and have their demons exorcised. Of course, there's also Jews coming from all over Galilee and Judea. And so Jesus meets them coming down off the mountain with God at a level place, likely a plain or a field. This is a subtle reference to Exodus 34 and Moses' descent from Mount Sinai. It's also probably an allusion to Isaiah 40, which was already quoted in Luke 3 by John the Baptist. That talked about the day of God's arrival looking like mountains being leveled because of the way God would humble the exalted and lift up the oppressed. And then Jesus begins preaching to all the people from this plain, mirroring Matthew 5 through 7's Sermon on the Mount. Only this time it's not on a mountain, it's at a level place, representing the accessibility that all people can have to the kingdom of God. And turning his gaze toward his disciples, he began to say, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you and ostracize you and insult you and scorn your name as evil for the sake of the Son of Man. Be glad in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way their fathers used to treat the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you are receiving your comfort in full. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for their fathers used to treat the false prophets in the same way." Jesus begins by blessing the poor and the hungry and the persecuted, while cursing the rich and the full and the satisfied, or at least telling them to be careful. He says that all of their fortunes are going to be flipped in time, because this messianic kingdom of God is not like any other kingdom in the world. It doesn't reward the power hungry with more power, and it does not allow for the exploitation of the powerless. Jesus further encourages those people who are persecuted. He says they can identify with all of the Old Testament prophets, like Jeremiah. They were similarly persecuted and humiliated by those who were in power, simply for speaking the message of truth that God had given them. In contrast to that, the false prophets of that time, they had news that was easier to hear, and they got perks for it. They got rewarded for it. But it all ended up being a lie, and God judged them accordingly. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. And whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. Treat others the same way you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. But love your enemies, and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men. The nature of Jesus' upside-down kingdom really comes into focus in these verses. Jesus says the real way to true life change is not through fighting an enemy, but loving them. If we all went around treating others the way we wanted them to treat us, we would create a society where everyone is looking out for each other, where everyone equally benefits. And through amplifying our own suffering when that doesn't happen, like turning the other cheek, we make the powers of unjust authority second-guess their oppression while exposing them to the rest of the world as selfish and self-serving. Even sinners and people who care nothing about righteousness, they do good things in order to get rewarded. They give loans to people who they know will pay them back. But we, as Christ followers, should always be doing good for other people, even when we know without a doubt that there is no way for us to get anything in return. After all, it's all about being God's image. If he loves all people, even those people who we consider enemies, then we should love them too. Now, it's easy to say all this, but it's way harder to live it out. It's completely countercultural in every culture, right? Because it's against human nature, and yet it is a prerequisite in Jesus' kingdom of God. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Pardon, and you will be pardoned. Give, and it will be given to you. They will pour into your lap a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. For by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return. Jesus is saying that we should emulate God's attributes in our relationships with other people, especially our enemies. We should be merciful. We should have compassion. We should forgive people. And we should give to others too. And Jesus says that this is the key to receiving our own blessings and rewards. When we forgive, that's when we're forgiven. When we show compassion, that's when we receive it. Now, those blessings running over don't always look like material resources, but they're even better than material resources because they're eternal, they're everlasting, they're treasures in heaven. Maybe it looks like deep discipleship relationships. Maybe it looks like the church bearing one another's burdens. But at the end of it all, even if we receive none of that in this life here, God is sure to reward us for everything we've done in his name in the new creation to come. And he also spoke a parable to them. A blind man cannot guide a blind man, can he? Will they not both fall into a pit? A pupil is not above his teacher, but everyone, after he has been fully trained, will be like his teacher. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me take out the speck that is in your eye," when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eye. For there is no good tree which produces bad fruit, nor on the other hand, a bad tree which produces good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick grapes from a briar bush. The good man, out of the good treasure of his heart, brings forth what is good. And the evil man, out of the evil treasure, brings forth what is evil. For his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart. Now here, Jesus warns against self-righteousness and hypocrisy. His message of encouragement to us should not be an excuse to overlook our own flaws and try to lead even when we're blind to our own shortcomings. It's very easy to be fooled by religious hypocrites, but the way that we check them and ourselves is by evaluating fruit. Very similar to John's teachings in Luke 3, Jesus says that authentic followers of him will have tangible deeds and words that identify them as such. If someone is saying good things, but their actions don't back it up, well, don't listen to them. And if someone is doing good things, but their words don't back it up, don't follow. Of course, we need to be sure and measure that in other people, but we should also, in light of what Jesus literally just said, apply that measure to ourselves. We need to make sure our words and our deeds are matching Jesus' example too. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and acts on them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid a foundation on the rock. And when a flood occurred, the torrent burst against that house and could not shake it because it had been well built. But the one who has heard and has not acted accordingly is like the man who built a house on the ground without any foundation. And the torrent burst against it, and immediately it collapsed, and the ruin of that house was great. Jesus continues with these warnings, saying that people shouldn't just listen to his words and pretend that they're following him. To be his disciple, to be his follower, they actually have to follow his example and his teachings. Go figure. And Jesus says it'll be better for anyone in the long run if they actually do what he says. People who listen to his words and actually put them into action, they're like a person who built a house on a strong, solid foundation. The people who don't have any foundation. When storms and floods and torrents come, the everyday affairs that life throws at us, the person who is established on Jesus' words will stand firm. And that's contrasted with the person who didn't listen and will end up failing and collapsing. But also remember that the flood is a classic symbol of God's judgment on the sin in his broken creation. In order to remake it into a perfect new creation, he has to purify it in some way. Those who listen to Jesus will have an ark, will have security in the midst of God's judgment. And those who don't, won't. And so Jesus continues his teaching by telling us what his kingdom is and isn't like. It's not like the Pharisees with their hardened hearts and their legalistic coldness. It's not like self-pious hypocrisy, thinking I'm better than everybody else. God's kingdom is coming, but it's coming for the poor, the vulnerable, the powerless, and those among whom commit to living a righteous life even when they get nothing in return. It's completely different to how human nature works. It's completely different than every culture on the planet. But it's how we would treat people if we actually believed that everyone was made in God's image. So the question for each one of us every day is, which one will we choose? Will we build on the shaky ground? Will we give in to the pressure to look out for me and mine? Or will we choose to build on the firm foundation of doing radical things? Things like loving our enemies, humbly serving our fellow men, and completely following Jesus. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope that you have a good day, and God bless.